Hello, everyone. Welcome to Epic Work Items Migration Weekly. It's 21st December, and we have a couple of updates across different work streams. So, unless anyone wants to verbalize, we can move to discussion. Otherwise, we can still discuss some of the work stream points. Eugenia, you want to verbalize any updates from work stream one?
No, mine are mostly for information. So I think just reading it is enough.
Okay, cool. Thanks. All right, so we can jump straight to discussion, especially with the widgets and how new widgets can be introduced with the work item types.
Yes, are we skipping the previous points from workstream 2? Don't know if.
Oh yeah, there's a blocker, right?
Blockers.
Yeah. So Alexandru, you want to discuss or verbalize?
Yeah, I think this was raised by Felipe though, but I can verbalize it.
Oh yeah, sorry, I did not add my name there. Yeah, there's not much going on. I'm just trying to define strategies for each epic association on that other epic, and there's a lot. So maybe if someone can pick some of them, it will be good. And there's a point from Alexandru if you want to talk about it.
Yeah, I was thinking about how we can do that because like I was thinking that most of the associations are kind of easy and there is not much to be copied. And then I thought about like nodes, and it feels a bit much to create a duplicate node for every single epic, like for the respective issue sort of thing, right? So now what you want is basically replace the epic ID with the corresponding issue ID basically. But that means that the code should now be prepared to read from both actually the epic node and the corresponding work item node, or actually be capable to decide which one it wants to read from. So then the backfilling, all it needs to do is to replace the referenced IDs in the database, and the code will just read the correct node still. So that's one option, and I think that works for tables, for data that lives in the same table, both for epics and issues, right? Like nodes, like, I don't know, subscriptions, and I think there are a couple others. And we can go with the copying strategy for the tables for the data that lives in different tables, basically. And that's probably something like relationships or parents or like epic relationships that needs to be moved to the issues relationships and so on. So there is where you need to basically create a copy. I think we'll need to use a mix of the strategies. I don't think we want to create a lot of this data duplication that may actually like put a little bit more pressure on the database itself. I think it's like we're kind of stretching the database already, and that's why we have this cells thing ongoing and all that stuff to move data off of a single database. So I don't know if we want to just like duplicate data just because we want to move to the work items. But yeah, that's just a couple thoughts that we may want to think about when we decide on strategy to migrate data basically to work items from epics.
Yeah, so far the ones that I looked at, they are simple, but I think the most complicated one will be nodes and resource label events. I think these both will hold a lot of data. Maybe one thing we could try is just like add a new column to nodes table to hold and work item ID instead of duplicating, and then we just run a backward migration to switch the field or something like that. But
yeah, but that means that the code needs to be prepared to read from the correct like you'll still need to read from two different IDs, like two different fields, right? Because the legacy code reads from where it reads. But yeah, we can think about that on a per item, I guess, basis.
Yeah, we can post updates to that epic I linked. So we can open a topic for these fields there and discuss about it.
I would also expect that we use combination of both. I think we discussed this slightly in the original plan, and I thought that for nodes and labels, we would just switch them over. For the remaining, we would copy over, like, for example, hierarchy or assignees to the appropriate widget tables. But for nodes specifically, I think we should avoid doing duplicities because the node ID is part of the reference if you paste somewhere in the comments. Yeah. So if you would later drop the reference to the old legacy node, then the link would be broken. So it might be better to just switch over.
Yeah, but I think we can just generalize the strategies in like if it's within the same table, we don't have to create a duplicate. And if the data lives in different tables, then you kind of still have to create a record, right? So then for resource tables, we actually have the issue ID and epic ID in basically all of them. Not for the weight, but for the weight, you don't need to migrate anything. So that should be fine. And for the iteration, the same thing, like you don't have an iteration on the epic, so you don't have to migrate anything there as well. But for the other tables like state and label, you have the epic ID in there, so you can just populate the corresponding issue ID, I guess. But the code needs to be prepared to basically understand and read if both fields are populated, how do you handle that situation, right?
Yeah, and what did you mean by for notes it should be copied over? Are you in favor of duplicating the notes? Or do you mean copied over as in like you said, I was thinking for notes and labels, they should just be they should be just switched.
Yeah, the IDs should just be switched from like issue ID to the or from epic ID to the issue ID.
But that would have to happen at the time of backfilling, is that right? Or before we switch over to
The code would need to be able to handle both, right? To handle both options before we do the backfilling itself. So the code would need to be in place to be capable of reading for the epic itself, like for the epic object. It should be able to load nodes if the nodes are referenced either by epic ID or by issue ID. Because then when the backfilling runs, you basically want to replace the epic ID with the issue ID, or we need to add another column or something. I don't remember.
it's a polymorphic relationship, right? That's notable or something. So it's notable
Yeah,
type
so
and notable
we'll
ID.
need to we'll need to then update the notable type and notable ID from being epic and legacy epic ID to being issue and the work item ID, right?
Okay. So we would have code on the work item that when we want to load its notes, it looks for the corresponding epics, notes belonging to the corresponding epic.
I think for work item, we don't need to. I think for the epic, we need to.
Yeah.
We need to modify the epic code that looks like exactly what you said for both epic type and ID and an issue type and ID so that the legacy stuff continues to work even after the backfilling, right?
Okay, cool. So I think like you're right, we need a heuristic basically for each type of value. And I would say like, it seems to me that join tables should always be duplicated. So any record that joins two objects, like a relationship between a work item and an issue, a relationship between two work items, a hierarchy relationship between two work items, like those should all be duplicated, right? Because it's the same relationship, but it's for the work item object instead of the epic object. And then we can just delete when it comes time to clean up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and they live in different tables as well, right?
Yeah.
Like we have different tables for that, so you have to duplicate that data basically.
The tricky one seems to be notes. So how can we get a decision made on notes then?
I think we've already kind of have it, right? We have to have the code prepared to read from both types for the epics. And then for the migration or for the backfilling itself, I think what we will want to do is backfill it for a specific testing group, like plant stage or something like that. We test it out, like we run it only on .com, we test it out, and only after that do we do the full backfilling of the entire database, which would end up in self-managed, right?
Okay, does anyone not agree with that? Like, does anyone want a dissent right now? Because we could just make the decision. Okay, Alexandru, see for under number 10, could you like summarize that, please, like as a decision made?
Number 10? Oh, under number 10, I'll do that.
And then I think it was Felipe who brought it up originally, so we might need it in the actual epic itself. Where
Just one thing, I don't think this is just for notes and labels. I think this can be generalized a bit for basically anything that lives within the same table. Well, anything that needs kind of backfilling but lives within the same table kind of thing, right? Because that kind of implementation approach would apply for labels perhaps and for other associations as well that kind of need the same replacement of the reference rather than creating a copy. So as for decisions, I guess what I was saying is like if it lives in different tables, then we create a copy. If not, the code needs to be prepared to handle two different types, epics and work items. Cool. I'll summarize that, I think, at the end of the meeting.
Yeah, cool. We might need it in the epic, like I said, that Felipe linked. It looks like there's a table in this that, so for database fields, but I guess we need one also for relationships as well. So
There is a different issue, I think, for relationships, for each relationship created in
Okay,
that.
cool.
Yes,
Yeah,
I
but-
linked at my status update. It's the first item, the first link here.
Eugenia, I
That's-
think you have a point there as well.
This is more like a question when we copy, for example, relationships. We know we're going to copy every link. In that case, we will need to keep them in sync because they both exist. For example, you can reorder children. So legacy epic order would have to reflect that.
Yeah,
okay.
for the tables that we create a copy, we'll need to keep them in sync for the time being until we move on to reading from the work items, right? So we will first make the code be able to write into the two places, do the backfilling, and then start switching on to writing to both places, but reading only from the work item part, and then basically
switch off the
writing also
syncing.
to
Okay.
the back. Yeah. Like, because once we read from the work item side, we can verify that everything is in place, everything is working as expected, and we can have a feature flag to switch back and forth between two data sources, the legacy and the work item. So once we are sure that everything works just fine, we can drop writing to the legacy side and only write and read from the work item side.
Okay. Makes sense.
And then there is the next point that I had about the issue ID in the epics table. I think Well, it seems like we have a delete cascade foreign key. I'm a bit concerned about the delete cascade thing on the epics table, because because we basically will not be showing the work item epic in the UI or anywhere, it should not appear. If somehow someone deletes that work item epic from the database, the respective epic will be deleted, and that may be a bit unexpected from where I'm standing. I'm not sure. It should not be possible, but it's still a way to kind of delete stuff that you don't want to delete, I think. So I was wondering if we should rather change that to being nullified. So what happens in that situation is you basically lose the corresponding work item if it is being deleted somehow by someone, but I think that's a better thing to end up with rather than having an epic being deleted. I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you that as long as we don't expose these work item epics to users, it might be safer to not delete the legacy epic just in case they would manage to delete it somehow. For example, I don't know, doing some group delete, well, not group deletion, but
Yeah, some API calls
know.
ended up deleting. I don't know.
Yeah.
It would have been okay if we had this field on the issues table. I would actually want to have the cascade delete, right? But the other way around, right, that we have it right now on the epics table, I would lean towards changing the foreign key to just nullify.
Yeah, could we try to avoid deleting group level work items instead of running another database migration to change this foreign key? Maybe that's easier.
The thing is that the code is dynamic, like someone can still add or forget to add a feature flag, or I don't know, or customers can just may want to try an endpoint to see what happens, input a invalid ID or something. I don't know. There are many ways that we cannot control probably.
Yes, I mean, we are controlling because right now we are blocking creation of work items on the API. So maybe we could do the same with the delete thing.
Yeah, I don't know. We may want to take it offline and see if there are any options. I don't see a easy way to prevent this, to be honest, but maybe there is.
So it seems like for the early phases of migration, it makes sense to nullify, no? Because it's a bit of a foot gun. Like if we accidentally run something to clean up epics in, for whatever reason, clean up work item epics, we're going to accidentally delete a whole bunch of valid epics in doing so. That seems very, very risky. Somebody could do that.
Yeah, I mean, that can be prevented once if our group is doing it, it's probably not going to happen. But it's still sort of something that is a hanging, I don't know how you call it, a hanging axe, right? It can just swipe anytime, sort of thing. If someone somehow forgets, we're all human, so it's just better to not have that trigger in the database level, just to make it a bit safer for our own sake.
I mean, there's literally there's no downside to changing it to nullify, right? I mean, if you delete the group work item, we just end up with another legacy epic that doesn't have a work item, which is going to be filled in by the backfill anyway. So
yes, but once that's done after the backfilling, then you kind of have a problem. So you sort of need to prevent deletion, but that's like, even if you end up with a epic not having an work item, it's bad, but it's recoverable, right? You just go ahead, create a migration, run through all the epics that don't have a work item and create it. But if you delete it from the database, now you need to go into backups and recover, and God knows if you did have a backup at that time or no, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe you should create a follow-up issue to change the foreign key.
Do you want to create one?
I can create the issue and do it, because Nicolas added the MR. He's on holiday, I think, for 2 weeks. So I can do it next. In these cases, we don't update the foreign key, do we? We just delete it and create a new one.
We just nullify set to null.
We can update foreign keys in.
I don't know. I mean, I think we have documentation on that somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can.
It may be just dropping and creating one or updating. I don't remember exactly, to be honest.
Yeah, it's okay. I can take this.
Thanks. I assigned you on the bottom to the line item. We can check in on it in future.
Yep. So unless anyone wants to discuss any of the workstream items, we can move on to discussion points.
Yes, this is mostly something that has come up with a couple of the last 2 widgets, or the ones that we are adding now. They are specific for epics. So it's color and inherited dates. But it was discussed in the spikes mostly. It was requested by PMs that from now on, we should be adding every widget to every type. Considering in the future they shouldn't have this separation, and that we should be just disabling in the types that are not supporting that feature. So I just wanted to bring up the subject to see if we can reach a conclusion, maybe write the documentation of how we move forward, because until now we are adding only these 2 widgets included to the epic type. We do have a disable option in widgets, but it's not really, it doesn't really work as expected, because every time we import all the widgets, we don't populate these features. So if you add a widget today as disable, once the importer runs again, like for example in a new instance, it will just write it with the default value that is enabled. So we just have to, if we agree to do it this way, we will have to modify the code and also backfill all the widgets that we haven't been added to the types. For example, we have a widget called process, and that's only added to key results and objectives. So we will have to add it to all the other types. That that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I don't remember. I know that we discussed it. I don't remember why we decided to have like not creating the record and also having the disabled feature. I guess you need a way to differentiate between a feature or a widget not being supported and a widget being disabled by the customer in a way, right? So like later down the stream, when you have configurable work item types, a customer, like a widget is supported by whatever type, for instance, by Epic type, but the customer decides that they don't want it, then you kind of have that disabled tick. But I don't know that we would have any widgets across all the types that are not supported, right? Like there is no reason for an Epic to not support iteration or for an OKR to objective to not support iteration. Like we are calling it that these are not supported, but that's just because how we see objectives and epics and all that stuff. It doesn't mean that the customer should not be able to do that. So yeah, I think it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I also think that this disabled flag was added for this reason, so we could override the enablement inside a specific namespace later down the road. But I said it's a long time ago we added this, so I can check tomorrow. Yeah, I think it shouldn't be needed to basically have this flag at this point. So I can think of the reason why we would need to set disabled explicitly for default types at this point. But if it helps, then it's an option too.
I think from the setup we have in the backend at the moment, it's okay to just keep adding the widget to the type we want. For example, color to Epic, and that's it. But I was wondering if from product perspective, there's a reason why we would want to include every new widget from now on in every type. Because unless I understood this wrong, that has been the request to include every widget in every type.
But it also makes the transition, right? Conversion of one type to another easier if you already have the types, I guess. So like when you convert an epic to an issue, if you already have the widgets there, but they are just disabled, you don't have to create new records basically in the database. You just set the flag to enabled and whatever widgets need to be disabled to disable. So from that perspective, it's easier, I guess.
I'd say from a product perspective, one of the further away things that we want to explore is allowing customers to customize work item types where they could change the name, but also disable different widgets, right? So if somebody doesn't want to use a certain widget, being able to disable it reduces the noise, right? And cleans up the experience. The reason why we've been more explicit about saying omit things like milestones on epics for now, for example, we know that customers want to be able to associate milestones epics, but there's a lot of like dependencies to make that a good experience. Like we need to handle how we're going to display parents on time box reports, for example, which we're kind of sorting through right now with issues and tasks and how that will look. But it's almost like for certain things that we want to have disabled for now, it's because the user experience hasn't been cleaned up enough for that particular use case as like during this transition period, but we do want to make it so that makes sense. There will be times where like it doesn't make make sense to have a widget on other different types, right? Like progress, for example. But that's also something where I could see progress being extended to like automatically calculate progress from children on parent work item types, right? So it's sort of, it makes sense to have all of the widgets be available for all types if they can be explicitly disabled, right? Until the user experience is at a point where we can enable it and not be a weird experience. That's my 2 cents. Amanda, anything else to add?
No, you're spot on.
Yeah, so I guess the question, well, not the question, but it sounds like as of now, there are no widgets that are not explicitly supported on a specific type, right? Like all widgets are supported basically on all types. It's just that on some types we don't want them enabled because of whatever reasons, because just how we see the types behaving at this point in time, basically, right? Because like eventually, if we come down to the time where some widgets doesn't make sense to be supported on a type, we need to we need to be able to kind of specify that somehow in the database, and we cannot reuse the disabled field for that because that signifies something different. That means that the customer disabled that. It doesn't mean that it's not supported. But it sounds like right now we don't yet need that, and when we need that, we can just add another field like unsupported or something like that. I don't know.
Right, because I think the high level architecture design goal at this point is to make everything work with everything, and to be like a sort of generic extensible object model. And the more we like our hard code logic against that, that's why I've sort of been championing like don't hard code logic against types, because it makes it harder to reason about, and it also makes it like more complicated to add in like this is only going to work with that thing but not this other thing. What we really want to do is just make it a generic extensible object model called work items, so that everything sort of works together, and that way we design it at least the happy path of everything working on everything. That's the ultimate goal, and then from there we can like figure stuff out, but I don't see us deviating from that like primary objective from a vision standpoint.
So just to conclude, like it sounds, Eugenia, that we should be adding all widgets to all types and just tick the disabled field to whatever it needs to be enabled or disabled based on that type.
Okay, in that case, maybe this is something that can be done to backfill what's missing, and also modify that we populate the disable column, if that's we agree. Mostly to not block the two current widgets we have, the color and dates. They're being added only to Epic. Because if we add it with disable for all other types, the disable will be deleted with the importer. So I can create an issue for this, but if we decide, I think it's important as well because maybe other teams can add widgets. So if we have a standard of what we do with new widgets, is ideal. So we can say every new widget needs to be added to every type and disable where we don't want it supported. But yeah, this will have to be backfill.
Will we pass the work item widgets to the GraphQL API then, just with disabled? Because if so, there'll need to be some front end changes also.
We are fetching only enable widgets, so that's working in that we only display for types what's enabled. But we don't have a single widget in the database that's disabled. Every widget disable column is false. That's the default value. We haven't added, so I wasn't sure to begin with if this feature was supposed to be used for that, or maybe for the customer overriding it later. So it was more about the decision of if we keep going like we do, that unsupported means not adding it to the type, or that we have to add it to every type and change that column value. That seems to be the second option, seems to be what we agree on.
Then I wonder though, I wonder if we should be adding actually a new column instead of using the disabled, so that we don't confuse ourselves down the line when we get to the point where we want to support disabled and not disabled by the customer, right? Because then our code will be using disabled all over the place, but it'll actually mean unsupported, right? In the specific type. So maybe, I don't know.
But what would be the difference when the customers disable a widget? Is it only for them?
Yeah, it's only for that namespace.
Mm.
Yeah, it's when you say like it's disabled, but because this is how I want to construct the work item type for myself, I want to disable this widget and this widget, even though it's still supported on that type.
They're all supported on all types except when we've automatically disabled them on the customer's behalf, right?
At this point in time, I think so, right? Yeah, so then we don't need a field. It's
Yeah,
like
so
they're
that's the way I
uh,
understand it, is like if you would go to your Epic work item customization page where you can customize the Epic work item, you'll see a bunch of fields that don't make any sense for Epic that are, well, that's wrong. That we don't currently support for Epic, but we do for other work items that you could switch on if you felt like it, or if it suited your work.
yeah, actually that makes sense, right?
I mean,
Yeah, so these are basically presets. This is something pre-configured that you as a customer has copied over from a GitLab preset, but you can modify it by switching off or on the disabled field. Yeah.
it's a good discussion. I mean, I recently started working on color widget, right? So I went through the work that has done 8 months ago, which is moving into work item definition table. Prior to that, we were using just constants. So what I understand today is, if you take example of progress widget in the database, it is only present for objective and key result objects, or for those types. The record is not even present for any of the other work item types. And according to Jan's comment, I also agree this because I just followed through the implementation doc of work item definitions, which clearly said disable would be used for overriding of type names. So I think, as Alexander also said, before taking a call on whether to add widget to all the types and then use disabled or add a new column, let's figure out a way of how to handle the overriding part. At the same time, also think about disabled ones, and then we can take it forward, I guess.
Yeah, I think if the customer can override to disable, they're going to be able to override to enable something if we add it to every type.
Yeah, I mean, but
So
I think from Jan's perspective, I think what he meant by overriding, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I understood is, by overriding, they're basically changing the work item type name from issue to maybe some other company's issue. They're changing the name itself. Maybe some people might call objective as a key result as a KPI, right? In those cases, he wanted to use the disabled field for the KR and progress, and then create a new record which says KPI. For that, the disabled would be true. That's what he meant by overriding, I guess, if I'm correct.
Yes, yeah. So whenever we didn't get there yet, right? We don't have any customization, but when we get into customization of the work item types, each root namespace will have to create a copy of the record that they want to override, right? So when we will move on to customization, if there are no specific records for that namespace, they will be using the instance records, the one that have namespace null. But if they want to customize it, at the time that they want to customize, a new copy or a copy of that record for that namespace will be created. And then you can change a bunch of the attributes for the type name, enabled, disabled, like widgets, maybe names of the widgets. We'll see, like labels of the widgets. There is a lot to play with. But they will still use that disabled tick, but only for their own record. So you'll kind of have a union of all the records from the instance level and the namespace.
Yep.
Well, not a union, but an exclusion, I guess. But yeah, you get the idea.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we need an issue for this to backfill all those widget records.
John, I think the primary thing is we need to basically standardize how we want to override it when we want to override it. Then also have the support of adding disable, because earlier there was not a concept of adding all the widgets to all the types by default. That's why the field disabled is used in the earlier issues. So now I think we have two problems at the hand. One is overriding the type name by the user. The second is if we want to provide all the widgets to all the work item types by default, then how do we track enables and disables?
So there is no overriding at this point in time.
Yeah, at this point we don't have it, but I'm just saying because as it is, as the point is covered in the work item definition stable implementation, I'm just bringing it out.
Yeah, I still think we need the backfilling to be done, and
Backfilling is
for the records that are missing, we just set the disabled to true. So we do a backfilling of the missing widgets, but with disabled true at this point in time, and move forward with that concept that for the instance level work item types, we will define the widgets that are not supported in our concept by setting the disabled true.
Yeah, I mean, even see, that part is clear, Alexander. I mean, the disabled part and all the widgets, that part I'm clear. Now, the another problem which is addressed earlier and which will miss now if we use disable for this purpose is if the user want to rename task to, let's say, task 1 as the default type name. In that case, the current proposal is to add a new record for each and every widget for that type in the work item definition with disabled as false, and then make disabled true for the previous work item type.
No.
No, it's okay. Then maybe I got it wrong.
Yeah, so when the customer wants to create to rename the task to task 1, right? A new record for the type is created, right? With the task 1. And then all the widgets as they are for the task are copied and referenced to the task 1. And now is only when the customer could go into their configuration UI or whatever and set disabled or enabled or like switch on or off all of those widgets. So when you want to basically redefine a type, you get a copy of all the widgets, just the same as they were before, but now you have the capability of only changing your own type and not the instance level type.
Got it. Now it makes sense. I think then just backfilling would suffice.
Yeah. Cool.
Right. Does anyone have capacity to take this? Just to create the issue, we can worry about who actually does it later, but I think we need the backfilling, and it sounds like we might need a docs update as well for anyone who might be onboarding in future.
Yes, I can create the issue.
So where does it go, this issue, though? Because like it seems like it's blocking adding a couple of widgets. So I guess it goes to workstream 1 as the feature parity thing.
Yeah, I will say so. It's part of the features we're adding. I think because this would need modifying the importer code, we are okay with allowing the current widgets to move on. We don't want to block color and dates. So they can keep adding it just to Epic, and then when we do backfill, we backfill these 2 new widgets as well. I think that would be okay. Otherwise, we would block these 2 widgets.
Okay.
If we backfill everything with disabled true, do we have the logic in there to take account of disabled being true? Because if I heard you right, we only have disabled false at the minute.
When we fetch the widget from a type, we fetch enable ones, only enable ones.
Okay, cool.
The thing is, none of them are disabled at the moment, but the logic there is present.
I mean,
awesome.
in other words, today when you fetch widgets, we fetch basically all the widgets attached to the type because we are not honoring the disabled field at this point of time. Going forward, we will just add a check by checking only return disabled false ones.
We do have it in the places I checked at least.
Okay. I mean, from what I saw.
Type, I think when you go to type.
Okay. I mean, I thought we were getting those constants. We are getting those things from the constants.
I mean, we can easily add a couple specs.
Yeah, we could definitely.
And make sure that if a widget is disabled, it's not fetched. I think it should not be too difficult, but
it's
like we can specify that in the issue. Make sure Yeah, it's the coverage that like only non-disabled widgets are returned or something like that. And we can create a list of places where we need to check that that is happening. When fetching a work item, when fetching a list of work items, I don't know, like whatever GraphQL queries we have.
I think at a model level, it would suffice. Because I believe we do use a couple of methods which says available widgets. That should do the trick, I guess. Today, that point, in that method, we don't have any checks regarding to disabled field. If we add it there, that should do the trick, I guess, for the most part. But I'm just thinking on my feet. I could be wrong here.
Eugenia, you already have an assigned takeaway from this meeting. Are you sure you're okay
Yeah.
with the second one?
Just because I raised the discussion, I feel guilty of just someone else having to deal with it.
I can do it tomorrow. I can be DRI for it, or somebody else could do it.
Okay.
Yeah, perhaps Abhilash
Yeah,
can take it over as well, if you don't mind, Abhilash.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay. I'll spin up an issue with the draft. What I understood from this call, I'll share the issue in the channel, S-Plan backend channel. We could basically take it from there.
Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah, Abhilash, all we need at the minute is the issue.
Yep.
Thanks. Yeah, if you could copy Eugenia as well in on that, because she's the DRI for the first work stream as well. Thanks.
Sure.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So I guess that's all we have. So unless anyone plans to, I mean, we'll obviously have another call next week, like last call for the year. I'll be around in case anyone wants to show up. Otherwise, this would probably be a last proper long call of the year before we move into 2024. So, yeah.
It's been a pleasure, Kushal, and everybody. Thank you for chairing the meetings, Kushal, and for moving this forward. And thanks to everyone who took a work stream or contributed in some way. It's been exciting. I think this is the last big thing we do before we can really start delivering serious user value on the work items platform. So it's going to be really, really exciting.
All right, everyone. Happy holidays. Yep.
Happy holidays. See ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye.